Listen up. I'm inviting my friend Mr. Rich Hardy up to the stage today because he has a story of his own to share. So come on up, buddy. A little bit of a testimony about feeling stuck.
Good morning. As the plan with everyone who speaks in front of people, I'm hoping to change your life dramatically today. Just so you know, that's the goal of every preacher, to change your life dramatically. So anyways, my name's Richard Hardy. I was saved 32 years ago. It's a long time. A lot of life you can fit into 32 years. I'm learning that being choked up is okay, so if I break down, I'm still a man. Leave me alone. So yeah, my name's Richard Hardy. I have been a evangelistic preacher and drama leader and youth group leader and kids club leader and men's ministry leader and pastor and small group leader and deacon and what most people would prefer to see me as is the person who cooks the ladies' dinner for Christmas. Couldn't do it last year, and if you know me, especially in my earlier years, this is where I start to get choked up, you will often hear me say, God spoke to me in a louder than audible voice. When I got saved, it's because I was sitting in my pew, and when I thought that no one would accept me the way I was in my horrible state, God spoke to me and said, but I love you, and that was enough. When my son was born, I was scared to death of becoming a father, and in the moment, in the room, he spoke to me and he said, I got your back. And I knew he was going to have my back. Louder than audible voice. And there was a day, the pandemic had started, but I had steeled myself. I was doing okay. I was fairly peaceful and enjoying my relationship with him, and I was listening to this music, and I have this vision every once in a while, just so you know, when I'm in worship, and in this vision, I see Jesus, and he's sitting on the throne, and the angels are there, and the people that have gone before are there, and they're all worshiping too. And I've had that vision the entire time I was saved. But on this one day home, it changed a little. And yes, I was driving, but Jesus came down off his throne, and I felt his arms come around me. And he said, I got you. And I went, oh no. I got to tell you, that was my reaction. Oh no, everything's fine. What's about to happen that he has to come down off his throne and wrap his arms around me and let me feel that presence. So that year was the worst year of my life. Worst. I lost my normal 9-to-5 job. The COVID stuff was going on. People were fighting all the time. Just every time you looked around and you watched the news, people were fighting. I couldn't fix anything. And well-intended, I want to make this point, well-intended Christians trying to do the best that they could caused the greatest emotional wounds that could be expected. They don't do that all the time, but in this particular time, I was in trouble. I became depressed. I became frustrated. And instead of being full of faith and full of grace and full of acceptance, I just became annoyed. It was horrible. It was horrible. To top it all off, I was fixing my house and ripping down a bunch of plaster, and dust was all around, and I hadn't prepared to do that. I just kind of jumped in. There was dust all around, and I thought I was having an asthma attack, and it lasted for 3 days, and I went to the hospital, and they said, nope, we think you might have had a heart attack. And so through a series of tests, they determined that I had heart failure, and it was at 25%, which 25% sounds worse than what it is, but your hearts are beating at 50%, which means that my heart rate was about half, beating at the strength of half of a normal person's heart rate. And what the doctor said is, you need to wear this life vest. And I would put this thing on, which they said nobody would notice. Can I just tell you, I noticed. I noticed. And so did everyone else. Like this big battery pack. I only wore it for a few weeks, and that's another story. But the reason for that is because what was probably going to happen to me was something similar to what happened to Tim Grant. One day, gone. That was it. Or I would go to sleep and not wake up. Like that's what was going to happen. That's what the plan was. And you Google it, and when you Google heart failure at the degree that I had it, they tell me I have a 50% chance of living 5 years, with that last year not having enough oxygen in my brain to be able to think right. So I got 4 years. 4 years. And can I tell you that all the sermons you hear about what would you do if you knew when you were going to die, can I just tell you nobody knows what they're talking about? Part of it is, yeah, I'm going to do this right. I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to make everything right, and every day is going to count. Can I just tell you, I didn't. I mean, to a certain extent, I wanted to do that, but to a certain extent, I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. Thank you very much. Done. I'm fine. So I had a few things. I had the heart failure. So what do? I wanted to end with grace. I wanted to end well. I had all these plans. I was going to make these videotapes. I actually have some of them hidden away somewhere of the last things that I would say to my wife and my kids. I planned on preaching my own funeral. I was going to videotape my own message to the church at my own I had plans. I also, like I said, I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. I had someone ask me, are you ready to go? Someone asked me this word, do you want to die? Do you want to? And I got to tell you, my answer wasn't like I wasn't suicidal or anything, but I was ready. I was convinced my wife will be okay, my kids will be okay, the church will actually go on without me. I was ready to go home. I felt like Paul did when he's talking in Philippians 1 when he says it would be far better to be with him, but nevertheless I got to stay with you pukes. He didn't say that. I mean, he didn't really say that. He said it's better. That's what you can read it for yourself. But I was ready. I was looking forward to it. Every night I went to bed, I went, maybe. We bought a recliner specifically for me because my breathing was so bad and so loud that I was afraid of keeping my wife up, and I couldn't sleep it was bad. It was bad. And I remember specifically one day I was at dinner, and I was getting ready for the last test. And this last test was going to determine if they were going to put a pacemaker in me or an internal defibrillator in me or schedule me for some type of heart transplant, some type of major thing. All of those, by the way, are horrible options, but the options that were left. And if you Google it, you'll see that heart failure does not just go away. It's there. When you have it, you have it. And so anyways, I'm at the dinner table, and I'm not really praying. I'm just going, is this really it? Is this it? And I just kind of said, well, what if he heals me? That's it wasn't even a prayer. I wasn't talking to him, just so you know. I wasn't talking to him. What if he heals me? And I heard him say, done. I shuddered a little bit. And I'm a dramatic guy. I get choked up sometimes, and I went, should I start telling people? Because I hate hearing those stories when someone says, I'm healed, and then they go away and they're not healed. It's depressing, and so I kept it silent. And I went, what if I'm healed? And so I went and I had the test, and at some point the doctor, I go in, and I'm expecting him to say, all right, we're going to put a pacemaker in you, and you get to sit in your recliner for the rest of the day. And there it is. That's what I'm expecting to hear. But he goes, your heart rate is pretty much back to normal. All your strength is back. You're normal again. He didn't say, Richard Hardy, you are healed, because doctors don't say that. But he did say, that's pretty impressive. So I was impressed. So God healed me. I have 3 verses, because if you ever hear me preach on healing, I will never say it's about the healing. When God heals you, there's a bigger story there. And this story is about Richard Hardy thought he was done. He was checking out. He had plans of checking out well, and he was over with. But Jesus had better plans. And I'm blind, so forgive me as I bend over and take my glasses off. Hebrews 13 says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Sorry, I get teared up, and they're going my way. So we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? Jeremiah 29, verse 11, one of my favorite verses, says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will restore your fortunes and gather it from all the nations and all the places. So one more verse, and then I'll step down. I didn't time myself, so I apologize if I'm over. Romans chapter 8. Knowing all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. And so my message in this testimony is simple. God's not done with you. I don't know, and I really don't care what you're going through, except for, I'm sad if you're going through sad stuff. But what I do know, God's not done. You got a great story. You got a great story.
I don't need to say anything. Good to go. Thank you, Rich. Thank you. I have to tell you, before we really roll here, I have to tell you about the last senior pastor that worked here. He's an unusual guy, and I wait to talk about him until he's not here, because, that's awkward. But I have to tell you, Pastor Mike is the most persistent contactor I have ever known. Do you know what I'm talking about? Raise your hand if you've been persistently contacted by Pastor Mike about something. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, if you have a conversation with Mike and you say, hey, yeah, I can help you with that, or hey, I've got a few ideas, or whatever, okay, we could talk about that next week sometime. This is what's going to happen. On Sunday morning of next week at 0730, you will receive a phone call. Hey, it's Pastor Mike. Hey, we talked about talking this week, so yeah, it's next week now. Let's do this, And if he's feeling particularly gracious, he'll wait until after church, if he doesn't hear from you, and he'll call you again after church. And then if he doesn't hear from you again, he will call you again sometime that evening. Next day, the process will begin over again. And the thing about Mike is, he doesn't just leave you one voicemail. He leaves you a voicemail every single time he calls. Hey, it's Pastor Mike. It's such and such time. I've just been trying to get in touch with you. I haven't been able to reach you. Let me know, buddy. Hoping to hear from you. And of course it'll step up in intensity every voicemail as it goes along. And after about 2 or 3, he'll start to text you as well as leave the voicemail. Hey, listen, it's Pastor Mike. Tried to reach you, couldn't. Left you a voicemail. Now, you might think, because of your experience with other people, that you could just kind of subtly send the message, I've been kind of busy, by not answering. And you would be incorrect in believing that he would pick up that hint. He will not be getting that hint. It will remain unopened, hint unopened, text unread. He doesn't get that. He's just going to keep going. Now, about 6 years ago, someone attempted the unthinkable. They decided to ghost Pastor Mike. For like 2 months. They ghosted Pastor Mike. It's a legendary tale. What do you think Pastor Mike does when you ghost him? I mean, most people would just say, okay, I tried. I really put myself out there. I really, called up your business numerous times, asked you for a quote, or called you up about getting together for breakfast a whole bunch of times every week for the past 6 weeks. I'm just thinking, all right, I put myself out there. You know where I stand. Come at me when you're ready. So Pastor Mike gets out a sheet of paper and a pen, and he writes a letter. And he finds the address, and he sends it to that address. And then he waits 3 weeks to be sure that the United States Postal Service has had sufficient time to deliver that letter. And then he gets in his car, he drives to the house, knocks on the door numerous times and says, hey, I've been trying to reach you. I sent you a letter a little while back. Did you get it? Woo! That's an unusual guy. Most of us aren't like that. Most of us make like one phone call. I don't know if you're like me. I make like one phone call. I leave a message. Hey, this is who I am. This is when I called. Get back to me. If you think you can help me. Hey, we talked about getting together. I might leave you 2 voicemails. I might try to. If it's something really important, and I've got a lot of things riding on this, or I've really been hopeful about getting together with you about something, I might call you 3 times. I'm like 3 times max kind of guy, right? After that, listen, I'm not begging you to get together, okay? I'm not doing that. I'm not on my knees, please come to lunch with me. Please work on my car. Please give me a construction estimate. I'm not doing that. I put myself out there. After that, I'm done. I have no more need. And the reason I'm telling you this is that when it comes to our relationship with God, most people are a whole lot more like me than they are Pastor Mike. You've got something that's important, something you're trying to get somewhere with, something that needs to be done, something you just need relationally. You put yourself out there with God. Most people pray one time. Honestly, if they pray at all, they pray one time. Maybe twice. Sometimes you get somebody like, I prayed twice, nothing, I'll pray one more time. I'll give God one more shot. And if they don't hear back, they start to just drift. They quit, They quit. They don't keep going. No persistence. And I've run into so many people in my short time so far. I've run into so many who have had this thing happen where they get to a place where they really need something. They really need something from God, and they go to God, and they might go once, or they might go twice, or maybe even they go 3 times. Just a quick shoot up, hey, this is really important. I prayed in church, or I was in my car driving, and I had a few minutes, and I said, okay, all right, I'll be spiritual and pray. And they don't hear back. They don't get that reply. And here's what happens when that happens. Most of you, you quit asking after that. You quit. And you start to not only quit chasing after in that one thing, but what happens relationally when you don't feel like you've heard a reply? You just kind of drift off of that relationship altogether, don't you? You lose heart for that relationship. You start to get stuck, whether you're aware of it or not, because relationships, they're either growing or they're dying. They're like trees, you know. If you don't see upward growth, if you don't see new leaves, it means they're on their way the other way. They're on their way out. And so you begin to drift and stagnate, and many people can trace back the moment of their stuckness to the time when they said, you know, I really started going to God about this thing. I didn't hear anything, and that's the moment when I really started to just kind of cut back. Started to lose my enthusiasm, my fire, my passion for chasing after God's will for my life. Proverbs 13:12 says it this way. It says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. You know, we're all the same. The longer something we hope for goes unmet, unchecked, we start to get into more and more trouble spiritually. We start to get kind of sick inside. Why isn't he answering? Why isn't something happening? Why isn't this coming together? It's just real. I mean, we start to ask, should I even bother? Right? I mean, it's like that mechanic that never gets back to you. I mean, I called 3 times. Should I even bother? Should I keep going? Why? I mean, why? He knows where I stand. I mean, he can show up anytime I want. I put the invite out there. That's all I need to do. And what I want you to hear this morning is that Jesus has a very different take on what faith is like. And if you're somebody who is stuck, if you're somebody who has lost heart, okay, that's the way I put it, lost heart, I want you to hear what Jesus speaks this morning. And I'm praying, I've been praying all weekend that this is something that will actually, penetrate into the mind and into the core of who you are and affect how you think and feel about God the Father. This is Jesus in Luke 18, the Gospel of Luke 18, verse 1. Luke writes, then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not lose heart. Your translation might say, always pray and never give up. Never give up. Never lose your heart. Never lose your passion for pursuing God's will for your life. Never lose that itch and that drive to see, is there something God wants me to know? Is there something God wants me to do? Should I hang my head up high, hold my head up high, or should I let it hang low? This is Jesus speaking to this situation in life. Come on, Jesus, tell me why I shouldn't stop asking, why I should never give up. Luke writes, Jesus spoke this parable. In a certain town, there was a judge who neither respected God nor cared about men. Not that outrageous, is it? You've met people in their jobs, right? People of authority that just don't really seem to care that much. Just not personal to them, your problems. You ever run into that? Jesus had run into it too. He said, and there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, grant me justice against my opponent. Grant me justice. Something is wrong and you have the power to fix it. You're the only one who has the authority to fix it. Would you fix it? Would you put it right for me? This is hard for me in my life. Can you help me? Would you help me? And Jesus says, for some time he refused. But finally he said to himself, even though I don't respect God or fear God or care about men, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice, so that she won't wear me out by coming back again and again and again. You ever run into that? Have you? I mean, have you ever been in a position to need help from somebody in authority? You know, a bureaucrat someplace? Somebody who can license you or, give you a job or not give you a job, read your resume or not read your resume, fix your car or give you that one little life-saving piece of information that's going to save you a whole ton of trouble. And it just seems like you go and you call, you text, you visit, you stop in, you check in. It's just not personal to them, It's just like you're another human being. There are going to be more of you tomorrow, right on through Friday. After that, next week, there will be more. So really, not losing a lot of sleep over the fact that you're not happy. I don't know, maybe I'm just special. I have seen it. I have seen it. And if you have seen it, you can learn from this parable. It is meant to show you something, but not probably what you're thinking already. What you're thinking is, oh, God is really bothered by my praying. He's just driven nuts by it. Is that what I'm supposed to say? No, stop. Okay, stop. That's not where he's going. Listen to where he goes. He says, listen to what the unjust judge says. Listen to what the unjust judge says. For some time he refused. Finally he said, even though I don't respect God or care about men, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't wear me out by coming back again and again. Listen to what the unjust judge says. Remember that time that you had a similar situation where something really counted, where something really mattered, and you knew the way to get to your solution was you just had to keep going. You had to keep showing up. You had to keep being the squeaky wheel. You had to keep texting. You had to keep stopping in and asking the secretary. You just couldn't stop. You would have liked to have stopped. Honestly, you were getting pretty frustrated over time. You would have loved to just go home and say, you know what, I'm not dealing with that anymore. I tried, but you couldn't because it was too important. And this person was the only person, so you had no choice. You just kept going until you got the result you had to get. Jesus says, remember that persistence. Remember that persistence. And then imagine this. Jesus says, and will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? I mean, if this is how it works in the world, imagine what it's like when you take that same level of persistence, that same level of, I can't be satisfied until I get an answer. I have to keep coming. I have to keep asking. It matters too much. What if you took that to God? That day and night, please help. Please help. This matters so much. Would you help, Father? What if you took that to him? He says, will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? I mean, if you've chosen to surrender your life to the will of God the Father in Jesus Christ, you don't think that it's not personal? It's personal. And though you may not get the answer that you want at the speed, or something seems to be in the way, or just, you haven't gotten a word back, you need to understand it's personal to him. In a way that isn't personal to so many other places and people in life. You're his daughter, you're his son. You think he doesn't care? Stop that. Stop that. He says, will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice. He will see that they get justice, and soon, he says. Yeah. Says you take that same tenacity that you have for other things and other people when you feel you really need to get somewhere. If you take that to God, things will happen. Things will happen. I wonder if you hear that in your heart today. Will things happen if I go after God the same way that I've gone after many other people in life and say, God, Father, would you answer today? Would you grant me this request? Would you see the injustice in this place? Would you, work into this solution somehow? Would you give us a miracle here? And would you never stop? He says you take that to God. He is so much better than anybody else. It takes him so much more commitment, and it's so much more personal to him. You should expect that something will come about. You can bank on it, he says. But at the end of this, he issues this little challenge. It feels rhetorical. It feels like a rhetorical question. It's actually too big a question for me to even really get my head around. He says in 18:8, he says, however, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? However, all this being said, will he find faith on the earth? Let's just change it up for a second. When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith in you? Will he find it? See, this is a direct challenge to the tension that is inside all of us. Every single one of us, there is a tension that takes place when we go to God and we say, God, would you help? And if you don't get what you want, what happens? You start to get a little bit heartsick, right? You start to get a little impatient. You start to get a little frustrated, just like we would any other place. And your faith begins, honestly, it starts to be at disadvantage. It starts to break down a little bit. Jesus knew that tension was there for all time. Knowing that all of this is true, knowing that this is how God thinks and feels about you, yet, will there be even anybody left when I come back that really still follows and has passion and has heart? Because this is such a challenge. Such a challenge. I told you God cares, and yet I wonder if the Savior comes back, will there be anybody left? Will you be left? Will you be left? This is a hard thing. This is a hard thing for us because the truth is our heart is on display whenever we ask for something and then we get an answer or we don't get an answer. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know, maybe you don't. I have had a number of experiences in life. I think you have had similar experiences. Somebody comes to ask you for something. It hits you by surprise. Oh, well, And sometimes you say, yeah, I can help. Sometimes you say, you know what, I can't do that right now. Or I'm not sure yet. Could you give me a little bit of time? And I'm telling you, the people's response tells you so much about their heart towards you. I once had somebody, come up to me and say, hey, and they were very polite. I mean, you would have been impressed with how polite they were. They came up to me and said, hey, James, do you, I was thinking, could you do this and then go there and get that and pick that and just, do that thing for me? And I mean, honestly, I was entertaining the idea. I was like, I want to do that, but I don't think I can make that work. And as soon as I said it, it was like the light switch flipped back off and said, yeah, well, I didn't really expect anything out of you anyway. Oh. Well, I'll tell you when I can help you then. Never. You see, our persistence is so telling of our heart. You go to God, you say, I'll go to God this one time or twice, and I'll give him 2 shots. And then, you know what? I'm going to go look for help elsewhere. I mean, what does that say about us? What does that say about what we believe about who we're talking to? You know what? I sent a message a couple of times, never got back to me this week, so you know what? I'm going to go find the thing elsewhere. I mean, is that prayer? Is that what a prayer relationship is like? Or is that like just reaching out to somebody on Facebook Marketplace about that doodad they've got for sale? Hey, I heard you had this for sale. I tried to reach you a couple times. How big is it? What's the dimensions? Oh, didn't hear back. Go find it somewhere else. What does that say? How long we will stick around for a reply is very telling about how long we will stick around. And Jesus knew this very well. Your reaction and your response to a delay or a maybe or a not yet or any of those other things on the magic 8-ball, I don't know what they all say anymore, but your response to no response, your response to a slow response is so telling of where your heart is toward your Father. And you can see it when you're on the other side of it, but we're so blind to it when it's us and Him. And so what I would ask you is that if you're stuck, you've been stuck for some time because you have something that's gone unanswered or just gone with no progress or nothing new, no updates, I would just beg you to go back for a little bit, backtrack and ask, what? Did I persist? And why? If I didn't, why haven't I persisted? Why have I stopped? Why have I stopped? It's so telling, our persistence. And if you're stuck this morning, you've lost some passion. I'm not saying this is the only reason anybody could lose their passion or lose heart. I'm not saying this is the only thing. But I would go back and ask yourself, what was the last thing I prayed? And why have I stopped? Why? And what does that say about the Father? What does it say about the way I think about Him and what I believe He thinks about me? Take that tenacity that we all have built up inside us when things need to get taken care of. If it's important, take it back to the Lord. Take it back to God where it belongs the most. We have almost no persistence and we have all the wrong attitude. It's time to do the swap. It's time to do the swap. I believe that Jesus is telling us all, it's time to do the exchange here. It's time to bring the persistence in and leave the scuzzy attitude at home. Because He actually cares for you. And I know that we always deal with that tension about, why didn't He just answer me right away? I asked, why didn't He just do it? Heart check. Heart check. Here's a thought for you. If you go to God more or less planning to just walk off if He doesn't give you what you want right away, do you believe that He's going to glorify that with a response? If you go expecting like God works for you, if you go thinking God owes you something, if that's in your heart, and you can see it in your persistence level as time goes on. You can see where the trouble areas are. If that's what's in your heart, I say this lightly. I say this, I better be careful. But if it were you, would you glorify that same attitude with a response? Give me what I want or I'm walking off. I don't think very many of us are beyond that. And although God loves you with a passion that you would struggle to imagine, even hearing everything that Christ has done and said, you do need to know He's still the ruler of the universe. He still is the Father of all creation. And He always takes a step back from pride. He always takes a step back. God gives grace to the humble and resists the proud. as Pastor Mike preached so many times. And I'm not saying that you for sure, because you have some unanswered place, you're unstuck, that you've done this. But I'm saying we all have the capacity to do this. And it's worth stepping back and asking, what kind of heart did I go to God with? It is the humblest heart that persists the longest. It's the humblest heart that goes to God again and again and says, God, if you will, would you grant me this request? God, if you will, would you grant me this answer? Would you meet me here, God? And keeps coming back and does not get so proud and says, you know what, you didn't give me an answer, I'm gone. No. The heart that God looks for is that humble heart. As Pastor Mike preached so well a few weeks ago, it's that humble heart that God meets. I believe if you're stuck today and you really are just, pulling your hair out and wondering, why am I so stagnant? Where's my passion? I don't think there's any risk in the world in coming back to God today with me and everybody here and just saying, I got to humble myself. I got to humble myself. I got to ask your forgiveness for my lack of persistence. What does that say about the way that I see you, God? I've got to ask for forgiveness for the way that I expected little or expected too little. What business did I have to stop asking when I know who you are? I'm going to take communion this morning. And team, if you'd come on up, please, at this point. We're going to share in communion. And I don't know that everybody here has shared communion. Maybe we all have, maybe we haven't. But communion is a little small ceremony, if you will, or a ritual that's been practiced in the church ever since Jesus left the earth. And where we got it was actually directly from Jesus. He was having his last evening, his last meal with his disciples. And he did a strange thing. He passed the food and passed the wine, and I'll give you a more clear picture of that just after our worship team sings for us. But at this moment, I want you to imagine that Jesus is at a table, low table with his disciples, and maybe that you could just imagine that you were one of them, one of those people that he had invited and brought with him, and taken all over and taught and shared every experience with. And just imagine that it is you being asked this question: will I find faith in you when I return? What will your heart toward me be in time, at the end, at your end, or when I come, whichever comes first? Will I find faith in you? Would you turn your heart toward me and humble yourself?